Today I'm going to be talking to you about the SAT, and looking around by the age group here, I'm sure that most of you know about the SAT. We put so much weight on the importance of this test score in our society today, and it is an important test. It plays a role in college admissions, and it influences the way that people look at you. So I just want to offer you some thoughts on my SAT journey, and I hope that I can offer you some new insight on helpful tips when you guys get ready to take your own SATs. Okay, so you might be confused, but the first part that I want to talk to you about is that you need to be able to breathe and relax when you're thinking about your SATs. And this can be difficult when you have tons of adults around you and teachers always advising you on what they think are the best SAT strategies, or how you really shouldn't worry even though this is the biggest test you'll take in your life. But you have to be able to overcome these influences and take what's good from what they're saying, but also be able to relax and calm your mind, because a nervous mind isn't going to help you. Also intimidating can be the daunting pile of books that might be on your desk. And where I come from, the SATs, well, the kids start preparing for them probably in sophomore year, or so I thought, because recently I saw some kids in my school carrying around stacks of college board materials and Barron's books. And I was kind of confused because they looked a little younger than the usual age group of kids that I saw with such books. And when I asked them about how old they were, I realized that some of them were in 9th grade and in 8th grade, and I couldn't believe that they were starting to prepare so early. So just remember that although these books can be helpful, I personally think that you shouldn't have to prepare starting from when you're in middle school or even earlier, as it seems to be approaching. And most importantly, just always remember, keep calm, as the popular saying goes, and you'll be fine. So now let's move on to some actual study tips. Okay. When you start thinking about SATs, probably during your sophomore year of high school, many of you will find tutors and will start carrying around clusters of vocab words. While this is helpful for some people, it may be easier to start your vocab practice earlier by either buying books like this book, How to Build a Better Vocabulary, which I found to be incredibly helpful, or also just by expanding your reading list. You'd be surprised how much you can learn from just both the reading that you do in school and the reading that you do on your own just for enjoyment. By observing the author's writing styles, it can help you on both the writing section and increase your vocab list exponentially, which I think is more important than any cramming of clusters that you can do in just the few months preceding your test. In the end, if you still feel overwhelmed, you shouldn't feel any reservations about asking for extra help or finding a tutor. I myself had a tutor, and although I wasn't proud of it at first because I like to think of myself as someone who can study independently on their own, I found that sometimes a tutor is what you need, because my tutor imposed necessary deadlines for me to get work done on time. How many of you have fallen victim to procrastination before? I definitely have. So basically, a tutor for me was most important in making sure that I actually was on track with my studying. And sometimes that's all you need. So in summary, you should be working smarter. You don't need to do practice tests from when you're in 8th grade every week in order to get a 2400. Just by expanding your reading list, thinking about the SATs a little further in advance, but not overwhelming yourself with practice right before the test, you can increase your probability of success. Okay, now if I just wanted to talk to you about test-taking strategies, I would be no different from the adults I was talking about earlier in my presentation, because all we seem to be hearing is how we can get that top score and how we should aim for 2400 because test scores define us. But what would actually happen if we let our scores define us? In my town, I know that many people have begun to identify me by my test score. And although it seemed pretty interesting at first, I was excited when people started calling about trying to find out my SAT tutor's number and things like that. But it really does get old fast. And you shouldn't get too caught up on your score. It's important to work hard, don't get me wrong, because the SAT score is an important factor in your life. But when you start being identified by numbers, you lose some of what makes you you. How unfortunate would it be if when people saw you, all they saw was your score? Behind each and every one of us, as people that spoke earlier today have been saying, there are so many unique talents and abilities that we want to be showcasing, not just a number that may or may not even be important in our lives. Okay. So work hard, but don't be bound by your scores. You should be working to get through the SATs, score well, and then move on with your life. Make sure you're promoting the other qualities that you want people to see. When you start a conversation with someone, you don't want it to start and end with your SAT score. I found that SAT scores are actually a conversation killer, because regardless of whether you have a 200 or a 2400, when you start with a number, that's all you get. Numbers have no other meaning behind them. So you should instead work to portray the special skills that you want people to define you by, not just your SAT score. Dare to be different and dare to be unique, and that's how you'll be successful. Thank you.